This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate what if Naruto's future was an illusion. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now, wasting no more time, let's start the story.
With a nearly silent tap of his toe, Naruto, the Nanadomine Hokage, hit the ground, but the blind swordsman was able to identify him. The katana blade arced in the air toward his neck at crazy speeds. Naruto parried the blade once more in a clash of sparks, but his reserves were running low. Naruto could tell that time had taken its toll on the older man in front of him, who was not the cage killer he had known in the past. But he had wasted too much time on this man. It had been long enough since the blonde Hokage had left his village during this attack. The once Kyuubi container caught the blade, and with a sudden knife chop aimed at the swordsman's stomach, the natural energy that had developed around him sliced deep into the enemy's internal organs. Naruto had to work hard to muster enough strength to activate his Sage Mode. Naruto's exceptional hearing picked up the laugh as the blind fighter passed out and coughed up blood. "Why do you laugh so close to death?" the elderly Hokage asked, gasping for air as he released the natural energy again, the pigment from his Sage Mode fading like eyeshadow. The man grinned as the enemy nin's eyes moved in his direction despite their inability to see. The man laughed again as he passed away, but Naruto was too far away to hear him because he was already racing back towards Konoha, pushing his 76-year-old body as quickly as he could. Because my death was not in vain. Hokage. The mist has Destro. Oyed your village by now. Naruto Uzumaki never deserted his allies. From his very first C-turn, a ranked mission, that fact had been demonstrated, to persistently hunting down Sasuke Uchiha. To give the villagers time to flee by battling pain away from the remnants of his village. Forgiveness was not Naruto Uzumaki's style. Pain had lost 4 of his bodies when Kakashi was crippled. The Akatsuki leader and his blue-haired teammate had been killed when the human sacrifice had found out about Tsunade's death. Naruto Uzumaki didn't cry easily. Naruto had held his rapidly aging leader after Gamakichi released her. She insisted that he make her proud and promised to live a happy life. Only then, with a grin pinching her creased, worn face, Tsunade placed Sakura's hand over his and passed away. Naruto initially found it unreal and was unable to accept it. However, it became all too real when he felt the damp sensation of Sakura sobbing into his chest against his shoulder. He let himself cry when the other ninja turned away and he could feel that only his beloved Sakura-chan was looking at him. Before the Great Wall, he flew out of the forest with an extra boost of speed. One of the remaining Yondamine's pronged kunai was flicked by his wrist. He would be drawn to the kunai by the jolt of landing, which would cause the stored chakra to be released into the summoned seal. It would take a moment to arc over the wall and land somewhere inside the district. His father's flying thunder god jutsu was fascinatingly simple yet intricate. When Naruto discovered the kunai, he began clearing out Tsunade and Shizune's belongings from the Hokage Tower following the funerals of Tsunade and innumerable others. He thought of the others he had lost that awful month, just recalling how he had found them. Shizune wouldn't move ever again. Her body had been rapidly decomposing. Although it had been painful to witness Shizune in that state, Naruto was certain that she would want to be released as Kakashi had requested if she had been able to speak. After suffering catastrophic injuries, Hitaki Kakashi was informed that he would be quadriplegic if he recovered. After discovering this, Kakashi had been quiet for a few days until he summoned his team. After wishing them well, he prayed for their demise. Until Kakashi mentioned the shinobi rules, Naruto resisted. He had a clear right. At first, Naruto was too shook to even talk, and when he wasn't crying, he was screaming that he didn't want to lose another loved one. After talking to his sensei for almost an hour, Sakura cut off Hitaki's blood supply to his brain, allowing him to pass away quietly and peacefully. Naruto had also shed tears at that time. As he sobbed into Sakura's hair, he held on to her, wondering why he had to keep losing his beloved people. Without saying anything, Sakura clung to him while her tears stained his jacket. He allowed it to drag him through a tunnel of yellow light after the knife's tug indicated the kunai had touched down. A moment afterward, his feet touched down on the sloping roof. The city of Konoha was in ruins. The muffled sounds of the dying now filled the foul air, where the sounds of fighting had vanished. The whole city was engulfed in flames, and he saw that a portion of the Hokage monument, his own face, had been dragged down onto portions of the village. As the elderly shinobi created about 50 cage bushins and dispatched them to attempt to save the few that were left, he felt a sense of shame and failure. Sadness began to seep in as he wished his former teammate was still with him to support him in times like these. his limited understanding of healing could only go so far in helping the injured. Sakura gave Naruto their first kiss, her pale face beaming at him. However, as soon as he tasted the copper in her blood, all love was replaced by fear. Although it had been a difficult battle, the Rukodamine Hokage and Tokubetsu Jonin had defeated all but the last Akatsuki member. He could only imagine that she smiled in spite of the pain because it sounded so desperate and hollow in his ears. Sakura, hold on, you're gonna make it, okay? Just stay with me, Sakura. Being aware of his own folly. Baka, I'm a medic, I know. Naruto fought hard to contain her tears as they fell, washing some of the blood from her cheeks. She ruffled his hair and said, I can't go on, Sakura, not without you, I need you. She gave him a warm smile and closed her eyes, saying, you can. They need you, Naruto. Now, go, Nanadamine Hokage. Then she relaxed her hold on his slack. There, her face resembled that of an angel. He gazed up into her killer's red, glaring eyes as a piece of him died. Sasuke Uchiha merely grinned upon witnessing Naruto's tears and displayed no remorse for what he had done. She named you her successor. Congrats, Dobi, you finally got your wish. Naruto's clone, which had been drawing on the natural energy, was subdued by a sage-powered punch, which sent the power to its master. Evidently unaware of it, Sasuke was launched into the air before he regained his balance and growled, triggering the level 1 curse seal. The dead last to hit him, Sasuke Uchiha of the perfected Mangenkyo Sharingan, was clearly visible on Fury's face. The two fighters charged at one another. No, Naruto's dream had come true. Although he was the Hokage, his life was lonely without his family and his beloved people. He mentored many people to become like his grandfather, the Sandamine, who trained the next generation's will of fire. But with Konoha gone and everything lost, it seemed so hopeless. This was even more devastating than the pain attack. The Hokage of Nanadamine had not done his job. The pathetic remnants of his forces rummaged through the debris in search of survivors, but the majority of them only discovered bodies as he carried the tiny inert form of an academy student towards the hospital. Their quiet while he was walking was a clear indication of how they felt. The fox, like Hokage, took a while to get to the hospital, but he was horrified by what he saw. The building had been leveled and was packed with civilians and injured people. It looked like their tomb now. The Hokage dropped to his knees and laid the boy down. It was unclear how long he stayed there, letting his agony cover the shattered ground, until Naruto sensed more than he heard the metal scrape and threw himself aside, giving the mass of shuriken and kunai little space to move. A few feet away, an enigmatic figure dangled in midair. Naruto was reminded of Kankuro's karasu by its rattling, trembling form. Gaara. Kankuro. Naruto could no longer see them through the mist. Gaara stayed near his surviving sibling because the thick mist was affecting his sand. Both the Hokage, Sakura, and his lifelong friend, Kazekage Sabaku no Gaara, were concerned about this new attack on Suna and Konoha, which left both countries in disarray. Kiri was assembling their troops. Madara had publicly announced his audacious alliance with Iwa and Akatsuki. In the ruins of the Land of Rice, Naruto fought alongside Gaara. Casualties had been kept to a minimum by the two containers, former and present, containing the small army of puppets. However, when Kiri gained wisdom, they dispatched the best. The leader of the Kiri no Shinobigatana Nananan Shu, Kenta Usui, was a legendary figure. The sole person who remains faithful to the Mizukage. His family's Shingen was used with deadly force by the blind swordsman ninja. The three force leaders were pursuing the same individual. He had also lost his allies. Naruto heard a cry of agony and followed it. When he stepped on the remnants of Kankuro's internal organs, he almost passed out. Kankuro's expression was one of shock as the upper half of the ninja was positioned to his right and the lower half to his left. The death had been swift. After closing his friend's eyes, Naruto sped ahead in the direction of the sand tower that rose above the fog. The first Naruto smashed down the puppet with a force that belied his age. With remarkable force, the ceramic armor and joints broke, leaving little for the puppet nin to fix. Naruto knew he would win the battle because his opponent would have to close after losing his weapon. Then he felt a sword pierce his back and emerge from it. His heart was pierced by the blade, and blood oozed from his chest. More of his life blood was pumped out of his body with each beat. The old Hokage turned to face his killer, pain pulsing through him. The boy's head was twisted back at a sickening angle from his body, but the sword's aim was accurate. The man was a puppet user who had used a human body as a puppet, just like Chiyo had done to Sakura. He had been reckless in assuming that people valued life as much as Naruto did. Naruto briefly wished he had the Kyuubi to cure him again, but he grinned as the world's color faded. Now that it was over, he could spend more time with his loved ones. The world of Naruto disappeared. Compared to most ninja, Naruto had lived a long life. He was old and worn out. He could now relax. Naruto. Naruto's eyes grew wide, and his lungs burned as he coughed. Above his lungs, cool, comforting hands pushed the smoke out. Naruto could never forget the face above his head, but he did not recognize the room he was in when he looked around. The man paused and said, "Jiraiya?" with a frown on his face. In fact, he made Pakun appear attractive. Naruto gave the man a hug and said, "Gaki, you've never called me that, why start now?" The self-described super pervert was at a loss when he said, "I've missed you, Arrow. Sennin. There was a problem. Gaki, I've only been gone 10 minutes looking for Tsunade. Did Itachi break something when he hit you with that genjutsu?" Naruto's gaze widened. The mission to retrieve Tsunade? However, that was in his genin days. More than 60 years ago. The blonde hurried to her feet and looked around the room. He picked up a small mirror he had noticed. Little was visible because it was small, but the wrinkles and battle scars were gone. Instead of the faded grayish yellow he had worn in his final decade of life, his hair was once again a sun-kissed yellow. His eyes, the same haunted blue of his former self, were all he recognized. He put down the mirror, breathing heavily. His outfit, including the bright orange jumpsuit he wore when he was a young man all those years ago. What was happening? He attempted to release the genjutsu by pouring his chakra into the seal while forming a half-dot ram. Sitting at the foot of the bed, Jiraiya appeared half amused and half concerned. There had been no action. Why hadn't anything occurred? He was reliving his life, but why? What was happening? Throughout his life, Jiraiya of the Sannin had witnessed a lot. A child's birth, a father's passing, or a woman's bouncing breasts after having. He grinned and shook himself free. Watching his young apprentice move like a man who has seen too many winters, however, was more perplexing than anything else. Ninjas are taught that a person's movements reveal something about who they really are. This is how a genin with a sharp eye could find out about even an undercover junin. Why, then, did a boy who had just turned 12 move with such grace that it suggested he was much older and more skilled than he was? What had Uchiha Itachi brought upon him with that poorly conceived attack? The reason had changed, but the eyes still glowed with wonder as they had when they first arrived in the town. The eyes had the appearance of someone who had seen too much and done too much while looking at an old picture from a bygone era. They made him think of his sensei, the professor. All of that, however, was insignificant in comparison to what the boy said. Honestly, Jiraiya, if you would stop and consider what I am saying as fact, I have knowledge of where she is. Tanzaku City has multitudes of gambling halls, does it not? How did the brat know that? Well, yes, old man Hokage only sent him to Nami no Kuni from his files. However, I don't think I'm going to take a genjutsu-addled upstart. I've done this before. All this has happened before. I don't even know why I am trying to convince you, since you're probably nothing but this old man's dying delusions. That was the final straw. The child paused and turned back to Jiraiya. All right, you've done this before. Tsunade is in Tanzaku City, and this is all some sort of dream. Just how old are you, Naruto? The child asked. The expression on the Sannin's face as he attempted to decipher the number that emerged from the mouth of the Kyuubi container made Naruto laugh. 76 years young this October, he said. The first thought was of madness caused by Itachi's method. That had to be it, but Jiraiya had no way of returning the mentally ill child to Konoha's rubber room inn since Guy had already left. He would simply have to cope with it and perhaps gain more knowledge about this fictitious life that had been implanted in his mind. Alright kid, we'll play it your way. We'll head to Tanzaku, if Tsunade Hime's there, then maybe I'll believe it. If not, then I'm taking you back and stuffing you in a padded room. You got me, Gigi. Gaki? Jiraiya shuddered, thinking of Ma Toad too much. I got you, Jiraiya. Chan. It wasn't as sweet and sugar-coated as one might expect for a lucid near-death experience. Naruto saw it as a sugar-coated descent down a heap of smoldering hot embers and shattered glass. In his later, busier years, the old man who had become young had not given Jiraiya much thought. Naruto became the man he is today because of the tragic and sobering experience of the original Toad Hermit's death. He had a headache from this. Although it was great to see the old fool so active once more, the Toad Sage found it unsettling. It was extremely painful as Jiraiya battled him valiantly to demonstrate that the years of suffering, death, and combat had all been a nightmare caused by Uchiha Itachi's hurried retreat. He honored, bled, and wept for his friends, family, and people because he just could not believe it. He claimed that he, Naruto, was at fault and gave names to faces, people, and kids that didn't exist to him. No, whether it was Itachi's Mangekyo or not, Genjutsu was that powerful. He would not accept that Konohamaru's grandbaby, the small infant he had held not too long ago, was merely a fantasy. It was a daydream. No, since he had previously committed these crimes, wouldn't the fact that so many people he knew were deceased be present prove that he was correct after all? He was both happy and saddened by the thought. He had loved people other than these. These were nothing more than illusions. These were living, breathing ghosts among him, and he struggled to keep his features under control so as not to aggravate the anxious Sannin anymore. The more Naruto thought about these things, the closer he got to going insane, assuming he wasn't already insane. It was the most bizarre journey Jiraiya had ever taken in his long life, and the big snake rising from the ruins of the local government was the cherry on top. The more Naruto talked about his other life, as Jiraiya started to refer to it, the more difficult it was for him to cope. How exhausted and worn out the young man appeared as he dug up what he believed to be old wounds. Presumably, things that haven't even occurred yet. The childish tone of the supposedly Nanadem Hokage's voice contrasted with the rusty tone in which he spoke almost robotically about the horrific and gory deaths of his beloved people. He felt cold, as though they were walking over his grave, when the hermit's own death was brought up. However, it made no difference as the two sped through the somewhat confusing streets and came upon a suspicious-looking Tsunade and her apprentice. Two shapes were standing on Manda in front of them. Think about that, offer Tsunade-chan. Naruto had not often heard his voice. Although he played a strong role in the other life, the two men's actual interactions were brief. Unaware of the two Konoha ninja, Naruto struck Orochimaru with a barrage of metal. 15 feet, still no response. 20 feet, still no movement. 10. The notes and metal continued to fly 5 feet. All of the items were thrown well into the sky at 2 feet by a purple blur, and the notes' explosive payloads disgorged, leaving only a flock of birds. Naruto gazed into the younger, unchangeable face of the man he detested 100 times more than Uchiha Madara as the feathers and kunai remnants dropped from the sky all around them. Kukakuku. It seems as three meet together again after all this time. Still as ugly as ever, Jiraiya. My, what anger I see in your eyes. Still as horribly pale as ever, Orochimaru. I see your tastes in men haven't changed. The ninja were hit with ki only 12 years prior before the verbal sparring could proceed. Kabuto. A new wave of hatred swept over the group of ninja as they turned to face the now red-eyed genin, who was staring straight at the silver-haired spy, who was stunned by the killer intent directed only at him. Kasama. A wind made of nothing started to spin around the small child, and slivers of red chakra started to emerge from his body, taking the shape of a spectral fox. Orochimaru. Kabuto would acknowledge that he was not very good at what he did, but he knew when to back off. In an instant, the two were gone, leaving the two Sannin with a furious Jinchuriki. We'll continue our chat again. Do consider my offer, Tsunade. It seems we were interrupted. Only Jiraiya had to deal with Tsunade's condition, which made her tremble like a leaf against Shizune. Naruto snap out of it, and he did, much to their complete surprise. Naruto collapsed as his eyes rolled back into his head like a light. Nani? As he fell into the water that contaminated the passageway between his mind and the seal, old joints snapped. As he started walking toward the seal, he inhaled the musty, foul air. Although it had been a while, the man found it difficult to forget the directions. He had become accustomed to letting his feelings control him because he had lived so long without the fox in the previous life. Hello, Kyuubi. The room trembled as the fox's red fur emerged behind the broken seal in front of him. The 76-year-old Naruto stood in front of the beast that had dominated so much of his early years with its covert presence, asking, "Who are you? Where is the little brat?" The Kyuubi eyed the elderly man for a while before saying, "He grew old and died, but for some reason he's returned and now stands before you. We have much to discuss, my old friend." Speak. Well, who knows? Perhaps there was a chance for a peaceful situation similar to what had occurred during and after the Fourth Shinobi War. Maybe the fox could be saved this time. He wasn't sure. It was always obstinate, damn it. Tsunade laughed and said, "So he's the container. Hey. He looks like that fool you trained before he up and got himself killed." The four of them were waiting for the young blonde man to come out of whatever trance he was in at a bar in the middle of the town. Tsunade had wasted no time in getting wasted, and now she was reacting angrily to the appearance of those who brought back memories of her deceased loved ones. Just like every Hokage, fools the lot of them. The inebriated Tsunade froze when Naruto's azure eyes met hers. He and my mother died to keep the Kyuubi from stabbing me. Ba. Chan, so I'd very much appreciate you not putting your personal feelings about what happened to your loved ones into mine. They looked at each other, their faces tainted with anger. Jiraiya dismissed any involvement, saying, "Who are you to call me Ba? Chan, shrimp. And what do you know about my loved ones? What has this son of a bitch been telling you?" "Who am I? I am Uzumaki Naruto, son of Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina. I am the Nanadem Hokage. Who am I? Someone who grew to love you like a son, who loved the girl you made your successor when you passed on as Godaime, and refuses to hear anyone dare speak horribly of any Hokage past, present, and future because she can't accept her loved ones were willing to die for their wish that they could make the world better for their loved ones, namely her." Slap. Anger, fear, confusion, hurt, and insanity. As Tsunade gazed at the child with the swollen red cheek, those raced in her eyes, and the child's eyes stared back with unwavering conviction. The room was silent, and Shizune appeared stunned. It felt like it was time to leave this place immediately. As his teammates struggled to understand the Nanodyne's words, Jiraiya sighed, "Who the hell are you?" "How? Nana, what?" He ought to have turned around and taken the psycho home, but how in the hell do you explain this? Tsunade was rubbing her temple and fervently wishing her coffee was stronger or something. "Okay, could you say it again, but only this time, not insane?" she asked. Because there was no sense in any of this. Since his luck had held in this life as it had in the last, he used his earnings to rent a room in a reasonably nice hotel for just 1 Ryo coin. Here, he sighed for the first time in his explanation. "In 6 days' time, Orochimaru will return here to demand you repair his arms, correct?" Shizune grinned. "What is different is that it took me and Ero, Sennin and I another 4 hours to find you." When Tsunade started up her woe is me Hokage crap like she did this time around, she was so drunk she really said some horrible things. He evaded a half-hearted punch. "Unlike this version, I demanded she face me, after I failed to produce a stable Rasengan against that Tsunade. Ba. Chan, she challenged me that if I could finish my Rasengan training in a week she would give me the Shodae's necklace." The majority of the attendees began. "What I hope will not happen again is the fact I wore that necklace proudly for 4 more years before I lost it, and the woman who wore it before me, as we fought this idiot's first apprentice." Naruto glanced at the pale Jiraiya. "What I hope doesn't happen, that if things do not change for the better, everyone in this room will be dead in less than 5 years, and I refuse to accept that. So this time open up your ears, Ba. Chan, because I will only say all this again once. Hell, borrow paper from Ero, Sennin and write it down." For Naruto, it was a long week. Following his advice, Jiraiya had recorded all of the information the future Hokage had shared with his teacher and adoptive family. Then, in the hopes that this was all just crazy rambling, he started dissecting it like a true information master to see if he could find any references to facts or possibly something he said that might be deemed untrue. He then spent his time attempting to identify his boundaries. Tsunade took a few days to think about the offer and accept the young blonde's strange sense of family. Training, just like it had been done all those decades ago, took up the remaining time when she wasn't speaking to the other Konoha nin. To his annoyance, his abilities and power level had significantly decreased from what they had been for years. Because of the fox's inadvertent interference, his control was thrown into the stratosphere, his senjutsu chakra was unable to gather, and even his own chakra fluctuated in a different way than it had after the fox left. He had all the information, but his skills were jumbled, and it was taking him far too long to restore them to his high standards. An idiotic hallucination. Didn't dreams allow you to do what you wanted to do? Without the clone, he was unable to even execute a Rasengan. "What is your decision, Tsunade, or should I assume from the fact they are with you, you have already decided?" She said, once again, in a low voice that only Naruto could hear. "Take the office of Hokage. As Godem I must put an end to you, Orochimaru." The pale man sneered, "Fei." The silver-haired man nodded and then walked over to where Naruto was standing, grinning at his serene appearance. "Kabuto, take out the others. I am well enough to deal with my 2 teammates until you finish." So dissimilar from his actual behavior. "Hello Naruto-kun, it looks like we are feeling better today, that makes me feel better too." "Like you would even care, you sack of shit." As though he hadn't heard the other man, Naruto went on, my, if only your abilities were as strong as your tongue. But unlike Sasuke-kun, I fear you just simply are not made to be a shinobi. You know Kabuto, you alone have been the bane of my existence since Sasuke killed Orochimaru all those years ago. You've killed so many close to me, you killed her, and this is for her. As the morning sun filtered through his home's window, Naruto let out a yawn. In spite of the warmth that was cradling him, Naruto half smiled. She lay upon his nude body, smiling contentedly on her flawless face. As he looked at her, where the sheet covering teetered on the edge of decency and allure, revealing her immaculate posterior, her soft blonde hair, which was for once out of its typical ponytail, draped across his chest did little to conceal her own nudity. He moved slightly in an attempt to let her continue to sleep, but it was in vain because she meowed slightly when woken and then stretched, giving him a beautiful view of her soft curves. At last, she parted her luscious lips with a seductive smirk as she gazed up at him through her cobalt eyes. Indeed, Yamanaka Ino was a stunning, seductive woman who was amazing in intimate situations, but something was missing for the two of them. The two dressed, her in her Anbu suit and him in his Hokage attire, after exchanging brief kisses. After bowing to the Hokage, Ino quietly left without saying anything. Since Naruto Uzumaki, the Nanadem Hokage, and Ino Yamanaka, the Anbu captain, were the only members of their group remaining, their bond was more based on their loneliness than anything else. In an attempt to cling to what was left of their former lives, the two fell in love during a moment of weakness. Naruto turned to face the blonde, who was leaning against the window with the sun setting behind her, and said, "Hey Hokage. Koi." He drew her close and kissed her, removing her long hair from its tie, saying, "Hey, Ino. Chan." As the sun rose and set, their relationship waxed and waned. Suddenly, she asked, "Do you think they are watching over us?" She caught her breath from their exertion, her nude body heaving. "Hey. Well, I hope they aren't looking now. God only knows what they'd say. Probably go blind from staring at my ass." Naruto froze, his gaze shifting to the platinum-haired vixen. "Haha. I rather like that ass, thank you. I've gotten rather attached to its owner." Her eyes were dejected. "I know you love her, I know you wanted Sakura. I can never be Sakura, I don't want to be, but I want to be yours. Love me like you love her, please. Please let me in, let me love you." That night was filled with tears, desires, and words. He eventually came to accept her, and they had a lot of amazing moments together. However, the curse of his life returned, so it wouldn't last. Kabuto arrived. Death came next. "I'll send them your love, Naruto." Ino closed her lovely eyes. Despite the medical ninja's best efforts, the damage caused by the Kusanagi Kabuto's weapon was irreparable. Naruto, the seventh Hokage, lost the final connection to his beloved people as he sat next to her body. His wife passed away. Delusional as well as inept, my how Konoha's standards have fallen. Kabuto pulled a kunai from his pack, but he didn't really show that he was perplexed by the statement. When the blonde's hands appeared in front of him, he began to move forward but stopped. As his hands made a modified Yamanaka hand sign, Naruto screamed, "Shiseition no Jutsu!" at the stunned platinum-haired man. Everyone froze when they noticed an odd warp in the air. Unhurt, Kabuto smirked and pushed his glasses back up, laughing. "Like I said, Naruto, you just, arg." The man collapsed to his knees, clutching his head, which started to swell unnaturally, unable to finish his taunt. A bloody gash rolled down from his hairline, and his screams of pain reached a new, morbid pitch. His silver hair turned red with blood, and more rips slowly appeared. The yelling abruptly stopped. Kabuto's face was held fast in excruciating pain. Orochimaru yelled, "Kabuto!" His brain, a steaming mass of flesh, emerged from the exploding head as the body fell forward. Shizune appeared quite ill, but she quickly found her lunch on the ground next to her, and the other two Sannin managed to hold their ground by sheer willpower. As Naruto's hands moved to bring Orochimaru's form into the path, his labored breathing slowed. The snake Sannin's eyes widened in terror, and he quickly blended into the muddy growth below him with a huge grimace. Naruto maintained the posture for a few more seconds before letting his body shift naturally. Blood started to drip from the side of his mouth as he staggered toward them and then passed out. Glad he ran. Shiseition takes a lot out of you. As she struggled to understand what had happened, Tsunade caught the boy as he fell with a skillful motion, her hands quickly removing his shirt and jacket to try to heal his body. She shouted Shizune's name and her eyes grew wide before sprinkling her hands with calming green chakra. He had torn apart the chakra coils nearest his heart. Blood was accumulating everywhere because the energy required to pump his blood through his heart was blocked and his aorta was hemorrhaging. Fortunately, the hemophobic woman had been reassured by Naruto's words and the rigorous training she had received over the past week, so she merely hesitated a little before pushing past the sight of that red liquid and getting to work. "Brat, why on earth would you use a jutsu like that? It has to be a kinjutsu," You wanna die again? Tsunade laughed tearfully and said, hey, for her, gladly. Besides, don't I have 2 of the 3 greatest medics I know beside me? Flattery will get you nowhere. I'm still gonna kick your ass for getting this messed up, you fool. The Toad Sage watched in contemplation as the 2 medics went about their work. Everything that the brat says comes to pass. This is becoming serious. Regarding Nagato's location, I might have to get in touch with the network. Additionally, I'm definitely avoiding AIM. The man who died trying to give him a better life was leading the pack as he and his favorite sister calmly discussed her life, and the gates of Konohagakure were finally in front of them all. The woman who would become his Hokage again was also there. Although it was one of the more difficult facts to accept, he had come to the realization that, in the other life, the young woman next to him was essentially a stranger despite all of their concern. Because death was still a very new idea to the child he had been, her hopes, dreams, and hobbies all seemed meaningless before she passed away. Despite her quiet, reserved demeanor, Shizune had a rebellious streak that remained unquenchable despite Tsunade's oppressive need. To the older, debatably, man, it was evident that his sister had aged in ways that most people couldn't understand due to her life on the road serving Tsunade and her many debts, but that she was still only a child by social standards. Shizune must have been only 5 years old when Dan and her family perished in the war, and judging by her anguished expression, it would be many years before those individuals could be recalled with anything but happy memories. Her social development had been hampered by her 15 years with Tsunade, an emotionally damaged person herself whose coping mechanisms included drinking excessively and using gambling as a mind-numbing tactic. However, her family's composure, loyalty, and enduring traits remained with her until her death in TOL, despite everything she carried with her. Shizune continued to babble for a short while before realizing that their quartet had changed to a trio. To call attention to the 2 older shinobi, she made a tiny sound. Naruto was standing a few yards back behind them, his head lowered and his body tense. They were stunned into silence when he suddenly knelt and bowed so low that his nose must have touched the floor. After a few minutes, he got up and strode forward, his face held high, towards the village, the 3 taller shinobi following in his wake, saying, "Forgive me, my people, my village for the wrong I have dealt you." His precious people were inside those now. Opening doors. He hadn't seen some of them in decades. He would keep them safe, even if it was only a dream. No one was going to die on him again, even if it was only a dream. Mina, Sakura, Chan, and Ino. It was essentially the same message he gave to his people as he assumed his mantle. Drenched in the blood of a traitor he was going to see. I swear to keep you all safe from now until I breathe my very last, for I, the Nanadem Hokage, so swear. He had already failed at it. This second time, however, his nindo would be pure. At the very least, the village was just as he had remembered it prior to Pain's invasion. Only a few features had returned to their former state, primarily on the cliffside above the city. He closed his eyes, listened to the crowds mingling, and breathed in the town's aroma. A few moments later, he was reminded that he was not alone by the gentle pat of a sandal next to him. He opened his eyes and looked up to see Jiraiya's shaggy white hair, which he recognized. Shizune and Tun. Tun stood anxiously next to him, scanning the area. She believes that because of the war and the Kyuubi attack, the city may have changed. Ignoring the stunned murmur from the civilians who saw 2 of the Sannin, Tsunade said boredly, "Should we head to the tower or to the hospital?" Not even the brat from Kyuubi was bringing them down. At the moniker, Naruto growled a little and said, "Oi Hokage. Gaki. You know what we should do." "Shut up, Ba. Chan. Back then I was worried about Kakashi and the traitor, so I pushed you to the hospital right after you announced to the elders you return. Let's go to the old hag and mummy first. I dunno if I am ready for seeing them yet. I mean, Sakura is there. This life's Sakura, not my." He stopped and rubbed his purse. He started to head for the Hokage tower, leaving the older members of the group to watch him with conflicted feelings. Might as well, hell. It's not like any of this is really happening, so who cares? Before beginning to follow the boy, Jiraiya remarked, "He's shutting himself off again." Tsunade shook her head when Shizune began, "Tsunade, Sama. It's not our place just yet, come let's rewrite history." "Hey Sakura." Chan. The younger Sakura, who had been her murderer's beloved, sat anxiously next to him, looking up to see who had entered the room. When Naruto's old mask appeared, he rubbed the back of his head to keep his hands away from his weapons and asked, "Naruto, where have you been?" Tsunade walked up behind him and saw her apprentice and her killer for the first time. "I was out finding the best medic in the world to help Teme, Kakashi. Sensei, And Lee. Datbeo. She exclaimed. Sakura's anxious expression softened into a smile that touched Naruto's heart. I've heard from Guy. Sensei. Please, do what you can to help, Sasuke-kun. Sakura pleaded. As Tsunade nodded and applied a healing hand to Sasuke's forehead, Naruto turned away. Sakura. He'll simply murder you. God, why did I agree to that foolish deal with Tsunade and Jiraiya? You need to hold off changing too much from now on, even if this is a dream. Any chance you have at changing something big means some smaller events have to go as they did before. Otherwise the real events you want to stop might happen when you least expect it, or worsen. Tsunade remarked, her hand resting upon Jiraiya's notes. He yelled, don't you think I know that? But Kabuto did so much harm with his Edo Tensei during the war. Then when he escaped Itachi he went into hiding. He was always sniping our forces from the shadows. I had to remove him before he became too much of a threat. Isn't that worth some disruption of the time-space continuum? Jiraiya went on, time is right, Naruto. He would not permit a child, even an elderly man, to address his elders in such a manner. Your father once mentioned that he had to remove parts of his and others' memory from time to time due to the problems inherent with time and space jutsu for this very reason. If you know it's going to happen, you will naturally wish to alter it. But like any pebble dropped into a smooth pond, the ripples from that one little rock will expand and cross over one another, blurring out what you remember the pond initially looking like. Trust me, I get the principle. I taught half the graduating classes that back in my 60s. Then you should be understanding where we are coming from on this. I need you to promise us you won't change anything too drastic unless it's required to save someone's life directly. There is always the chance someone may end up differently than you remember. We have to give everyone the benefit of a doubt before we end any chance they have to change. He ignored the bewilderment in Sakura's eyes and nodded, saying, well, I'll see you later. Sakura. Uchiha. He tried to contain his murderous intent as his voice became distinctly hostile. The bolts groaned and cracked horribly as the door was pulled open with such force. After the handle pushed through the wall, he stalked away, leaving Tsunade in tears and Uchiha and Haruno perplexed. Gazing out of the large picture window into the city, he stalked down the stairs to the small landing between floors. However, he was only looking in, not out. I nearly went out of control. Oh no, until that son of a bitch makes a mistake, I am powerless. I detest this. I detest this. You're a hair out of line, I promise, Uchiha. I'll end you. Naruto nearly cracked the wall with his fist. He was stopped by the scream and gasp coming from the stairs below. Team Asuma approached him, but more significantly, Ino. He could see the shock in Ino's eyes, and her cornflower blue eyes were staring at him, likely witnessing his angry outburst. However, his Ino. Time was there. His adult wife's agonized face overlapped this younger one in a flashback. His eyes lowered and his hand fell from the wall. Once more, he had to control himself. When Ino asked innocently, is everything alight? Did Sasuke-kun wake up? He winced. When he stood up to look at her, his mask was back up. Shikamaru blinked in surprise as Naruto slipped by. He hadn't yet taken his jacket out of the scroll, so how did Naruto know about his promotion already, when neither Choji nor Ino knew? Why? Yeah. The T. Teme is awake. His usual grumpy self too. He. Well, I need to get going. Congratulations on your promotion, lazy.ass. See ya Choji. Problematic. Ichiraku Ramen was wholesome and amiable, much like his memories of Ayame and her elderly father. The old woman's face as she watched her husband being lowered into the ground and her tears while being held by her son Yasaka and his wife Rana were difficult to forget. He didn't see her again until 4 years later, right before she passed away. However, the older child found solace in witnessing this joyful, carefree Ayame. It enabled him to recall all of their joys and good times together, and how, despite the tragic news, the cries of Tucci's second son, who had just been born, revitalized the little store when he passed by it shortly after Tucci's death. He continued walking and once again found his town. In front of the small bookshop where Kakashi got Jiraiya's books, he paused, grinned, and waved to a small boy who was playing in the dirt. He would eventually become Yuan Fuke, the second greatest seal master in the Fire Country after Naruto's own father, thanks to those doodles in the dirt. He was just Lil K from the Konoha book stand for the time being, much to Naruto's amusement. He saw younger versions of people he knew everywhere he looked, with a similar yet almost innocent light in their eyes. He felt somewhat ill from it. Given how much the people he knew had fought for and earned, through so much suffering and adversity, The smiles that only those men and women deserved. How dare these people be so carefree and ignorant of their future selves' sufferings? He detested them and he detested it. As if intoxicated, everything wobbled. The town's rounded curves and jagged edges all at once drew in on him in horrifying ways, making him feel 100 times more cramped. After faltering and frantically avoiding these hallucinations, he finally lost his composure and leaned against a building side in an attempt to catch his suddenly shortness of breath. He needed to leave. He leapt wildly out of the street and onto the rooftops, arriving at the one spot where he always felt calm. His face felt good as the sun soaked in and removed some of the wrinkles his henge had caused. The ghosts of the future no longer drew at him with such intensity, and he felt safer up here, on his father's head. The part of him that was still the teenager who had lost everything was unable to handle the memories down there in the swirling whirlpool. He couldn't be sure because of the 50-odd years that had passed since puberty, but his body was acting differently than he remembered. He became angry, hateful, and afraid the moment he laid eyes on them. All he had to deal with were impulses that he hadn't experienced in decades. The body of that damned child was causing him to lose his ability to think clearly. It must have been. He changed his appearance and hid himself away because he knew that returning to that idiot would be unacceptable. Seeing his hands and body the way he knew he really looked had helped ease the panic induced terror he had given in 2 hours earlier, even if it was just a layer of chakra. A young blonde who looked familiar sat down next to him and said, "Ah, so here you are, Hokage." Gaki. He was only a few inches taller than her when his henge was active, but he looked up into her eyes once more while his hands were on his raised knee and his back arched. Nerves caused him to strain his back before the panicked spark was quickly extinguished. Her eyes widened at his voice, possibly wondering why he sounded so old, or rather, the rasp he had acquired. "How did you know it was me?" she asked. After he and his wife had fought him, Kabuto's god-abandoned Kusanagi left him a scar, which he rubbed against. His right shoulder had been nearly torn from his body by the blade. He was able to recover sufficiently to continue fighting thanks to the last of the chakra dredges that he still had from the lost Kyuubi. To prevent Ino from being killed by the snake? No, all he had done was to cause her to endure excruciating pain for 3 full days before she died. He closed his eyes tightly, attempting to block out the ingrained pain and guilt once more. She wouldn't die like that here, he tried to remind himself. If he was lucky, he might also see her and his people in the other world, where his body was about to die. All he needed to do was survive this. A hallucination. Once her curiosity was calmed, she responded, "You may have your father's eyes and hair, but the rest of you, no matter how old, reminds me of Kushina. You don't look bad for a 78-year-old. It was a joke, but her face's faint flush indicated that perhaps she was somewhat honest. Bah. Chan is a pervert. Leaning back to pop his shoulder free from the slight tension he had created for himself, he laughed a little, but he didn't bend under her stare. The soon in her name took hold as she sputtered, "So says the pretty young thing looking at her grandnephew with perverted eyes." Brat. She forced herself to look away for a moment, but when she turned back, she was wearing her Hokage face, as he described it. Usually, it indicated that she didn't like the ideas running through her mind and that it would be hard to say what she wanted to say. "I guess if I hadn't believed you before now, I would from your reaction to everything. You gave every sign of post-traumatic stress disorder. How would you know how my dreams were?" Sakura had told him about the numerous symptoms of that well-known illness. Saying such to a ninja was, of course, like telling a fish that all fish live in water. Given you know of that, I would assume you have dealt with it before. There was a breaking point for every shinobi. And the fact you didn't deny having it was another clue. Sakura or that Ino girl must have helped you out. I can't really see them being your type though. The two are worried. Don't put those two in the same boat as my Ino and Sakura. The tension from before had returned when shadows revealed the psychopath who would cause them pain in the future, lying in that hospital bed, and you avoided my question. Even though it was rude, the anger in his blue eyes glared holes into her hazelnut ones. Shizune came into your room a few times in the night or two before we met Orochimaru again. You mentioned a few names, ones I only learned about by digging in a bingo book or active roster, and those two girls. Sakura and Ino the most. Whatever happened to all of them had you so distraught? We had to sedate you so you would rest. She turned away again, and he got the look. He stood up, his fist clenched, and she quickly stood up to try and maintain what little physical presence she had left. I won't say sorry for doing that. Had we awoken you, you would have just run off to train and burnt yourself out. We were already taking a risk keeping you on the battlefield as it was. Stop acting like a damn kid and use that leader brain of yours. He turned to leave, but paused for a moment to say a few final words before leaving. And that's where you were wrong. I would have stayed and helped them, instead of deciding what was right for them then leave them in the dark. With a sigh, Tsunade's child-like figure turned to descend the city's staircase. He awoke with a start, his pounding blood and labored breathing creating a dull roar that drowned out the cries of his dying people. He sat up and tried to wipe away the perspiration that was all over his face and the guilt that was bothering him. He was startled out of his reverie by a gentle knock on the door. In spite of his 13-year-old self's clumsier physique, he quietly slipped out of bed with a kunai in his left hand, ready for action. He called out as he moved to the left of his door. "Who is there?" he asked quietly once more, moving to the right to avoid giving away his location. When he saw who was outside his door, his eyes widened and he said, "It's me." She was indeed there, staring at him with an expression that was impossible to read. Sakura. Sakura. She was standing in front of him, unsure and uneasy. He let her in and waited while she took off her sandals and left them at the door. Come on in. Sorry for the mess. In actuality, the apartment, what it was much cleaner and less littered than she would have imagined, and definitely more than he appeared to be considering. Would you like something to drink? I don't have much since I just got back from the mission. He nodded and the two stood for a moment, him distant and her anxious. I'm fine. Thank you. At last, the blonde became aware of the silence and stood up to gaze out onto his balcony. Given the size of the small apartment, the girl could still easily hear it. When he finally lost patience waiting for her to speak, he asked, "What brings you here, Sakura?" Naruto was interrupted by the statement, "I was worried." Why? He didn't want to come across as resentful, but to be honest, he and Sakura had treated him with near disdain until Gaara's rescue mission. Something had changed more than he had anticipated if she was worried. He didn't do anything but stare at her bewilderedly. "You scared Ino when you ran into her at the hospital. She said you looked angry and lost." He cursed in his mind for being so visible in front of his. She wasn't his wife, sorry. He did, however, smile slightly at the thought that Ino could still read him, even at this point. Sakura must have been perplexed as he observed the plethora of emotions streaming across his face. "It made me worried too, because as long as I have been your teammate you've never acted like that. Ever." He gave her a look when he said, "Then Orochimaru and Kabuto nearly killed me when Ero Sennin and her fought them. I managed to kill Kabuto but not before I was hit through the backlash of his own jutsu this time, but she didn't need to know that. Sorry, I was just annoyed. Teme and I got beaten up by his brother before we found Ba-chan, the Hokage." Oh. She appeared somewhat stunned at how near death he had been in such a short period of time. "I didn't know." It was true that she had only learned about them during his time away with Jiraiya, and that she had allowed it to fester until just before her death because she had no one to turn to. "It made me realize that all three of us need to get stronger. I know what I need to do. But you need to find a way to get stronger, Sakura-chan." She was offended by that. His hands clenched and he ground his teeth for a moment before fixing her in place with a stare that was unlike anything she had ever seen from him outside of their near fatal C-turned-a-ranked mission. "I'm plenty strong enough. Even if I'm not, I have you and Sasuke-kun to help me." Sakura watched, perplexed, as he gave her such a strange look and snorted. "No, you need to understand this, Sakura. Now, before something happens and it's too late to redo past mistakes." His tone was humorous at the time, but it was also darker than it appeared, and it made her feel something. He started talking again, waking her from her thoughts too soon for her to comprehend the feeling. She felt uneasy because of the seriousness in his voice and the way his stormy eyes seemed to stare right through her. "There will be people who won't care we're kids. They won't stop. They might even enjoy it because we are what we are. To them, all we are is someone standing in their way. These people will do things, horrible things. Even if you quit, it won't matter to them that you are unarmed, a civilian, because in the end, they will kill you. And that's not mentioning whatever they decide to do to you first. You need to be ready to fight them off." He gave her a look that made her rub her bare arms as though someone had slipped across her grave. That's a horribly jaded view of the world, Naruto. But then the man behind it was hidden by that smile of his that she knew so well. "Maybe." He turned back to his balcony and gazed at the stars. "Maybe it is. But you are important to me. More important than you could possibly know." The final sentence barely made it past her ears, but the intensity of it left her feeling a little flustered and out of breath. Since he had returned with the newest Hokage, Naruto had appeared completely different. He exuded an intensity that she was unable to understand outside of, say, Kakashi or the Hokage. It had made Naruto's abrupt transformation all the more obvious, especially when combined with Sasuke's initial lack of interest in her and later his open animosity. His shoulders jumped when she said, "You've changed." She stammered, I mean in a good way. Because this Naruto felt so different from the one who had gone to find Tsunade. Sama, she would never have said it before. In many ways, losing that contented, carefree child hurt her, but in a strange way, the mature trend he was adopting was actually kind of fascinating. As he gripped his railing, he suddenly burst out laughing, first softly and then loudly. Really? I feel like ever since I got back I've been more depressing than even the Teme, and then you say you like me like this. He started to laugh a little more when she huffed, but his humor persisted as he smiled to take away any hurt his words might have caused. Sakura looked at him with wide eyes and her face turned nearly the color of her hair. If that's what it takes to win your heart, then no thanks, Sakura. What? He asked, dismissing her query. She had to go back through those rather awkward moments before she understood what he was saying. In any case, you should take my advice, I'll even point you in the right direction. Naruto. How come you never mentioned Sasuke? She added Sasuke's customary honorific, which was another surprise. The more he considered it, the more she probably feared he would lose his temper and not respond. No, he was too sour and too old to give a damn. He gasped and continued, because he's probably itching to go to Orochimaru. It was a lie, but she didn't have to know how he knew it. The snake gave Sasuke the almost perfect way to get stronger and defeat his brother, given what he was saying when we ran into him. Not just yet. He started to say, given this last defeat by Itachi, I cannot see him doing anything but Sakura interrupted him. No. She clenched her eyes and pressed her fists to her heart, seemingly to prevent the truth he was expressing from being torn out. That can't be true. Sasuke would never leave us, we're a team. Yes, we are. But he's never been the same since his family was killed. He's only now just coming out of that shell he hid himself in, but Itachi did something to him. Him and Kakashi. Sensei both. It affected their minds, and while Sensei has experience and people to back him up, Sasuke. He went on to let her decide what she wanted. He refused to break the silence when it returned. He was aware of what needed to be done, she just needed to think. She practically demanded, what do I need to do to get stronger, so I can keep him from leaving us? When she decelerated and he accepted it, he nodded and gave her that smile that caused her to itch nervously on her cheek and then twirl her short hair with the same finger a moment later. You have the best control I have seen outside of someone with a bloodline, meaning you'd be perfect for both illusions and medical jutsu. But I can see you being a healer, more than anything. I bet you could even get Ba-Cha. He looked at her expression. Fine. Hokage. Sama, to teach you some things. You really think I could be a medic? Only his smile and unadulterated confidence, which practically radiated from his words, could give her a sense of self-worth. Sakura. Chan, I have no doubt you could become the best medic.nin in the entire elemental countries. Perhaps tomorrow she ought to go speak with Hokage. Sasuke wasn't going to be rushing off tonight, was he? Sakura left just before midnight, accompanied by a clone who walked her home to protect her from harm and, more importantly, to keep her away from the West Gate. He was waiting there himself. The situation had shifted. He had no way of knowing whether the Sound 4 had made it to Sasuke yet. Naruto halted, flinching at the voice, and turned to see Ino standing in front of him with her hands on her hips. Naruto. How could he have changed anything that caused Sakura and Ino to appear before him? He fully faced her and greeted her, which somehow caused her to scowl even more. She ignored his greeting and demanded, sounding a little irate, isn't it pretty late for you to be out, Ino? Naruto froze and asked, why do you know that sign? Oh no, had he not? He had his mask on full force, avoiding her question with a silly grin and a silly scratch at his neck. I dunno what you mean. His smile wavered and then vanished, leaving him unsure. Drop the act. Now. That sign you keep giving me, that's something no one, should know about outside my family. Who are you? Who are you really? That meant he had been, damn it. The person in charge of the body or the person in front of them was identified as a Yamanaka by the simple sign. It was created as a covert means of preventing accidental deaths in the event that such an incident arose. He had done the sign every time they greeted each other for many years with Ino. It became their gesture, and theirs alone, a sign of love because her family had been wiped out in the Fourth World War. He didn't want to take it away from her, and she didn't want to let go of the connection to her past. Thus, he always made the sign when he greeted her. He was so instinctive about it. It seems that he learned it too well, And old dogs are always performing tricks. For once, he couldn't think of anything he should say or do to prevent her from killing him, freaking out, or both. He must have been exhausted because the edge of her attitude seemed to waver when he said, "It's really me, Naruto, Ino-chan. I can explain. But, it's going to sound insane. Try me." The back edge. Someone else was, too. Yamanaka. Dobi. For heaven's sake. With a backpack on his back and a chilly expression in his eyes, the two turned to see Sasuke. "Sasuke?" inquired Ino in alarm. Naruto was not surprised that Sasuke would defect, but even he found the timing too unbelievable. His tone and words were, "You're leaving too soon, Teme. What brought about this change?" He had had enough of playing around, and now the two Narutos in front of him were facing a different Naruto entirely. Before his arrogance returned, Sasuke paused, unsure of the character of the boy in front of him. Danzo had forgotten about the man's tenuous relationship with Orochimaru. "I heard the mummy Danzo and that Tsunade woman talking. How strong you've become. How you killed a Junin-level ninja with one blow, how you made Orochimaru retreat." In any case, he would be dealt with shortly. However, Sasuke's attention was drawn to the present by the all-too-familiar insanity that filled his now red glowing eyes as he pointed to his neck. "I'll take that bastard's offer, grow stronger than even him, stronger than you, then kill my brother. It's clear to me now you've been taking all my chances to gain strength. This village and you have been holding me back." Sass. Sasuke.kun. Ino shuddered at the smile Sasuke gave them. He already looked too much like Naruto's favorite snake, Sanin. It only made him more inflexible. He said in a low, nearly growling voice, "Know your place, Uchiha." Even though his skills weren't up to par, his mind was sharp enough to defeat Sasuke. "You take another step towards the gate and I will take you down." However, he was now outmatched because four shapes emerged from the shrouded darkness, proving that mind was not always superior to matter. A level of primal rage was only heightened by the Uchiha's arrogance as the Sound 4 and all of their level 1 curse. Marked Glory sneered at Naruto. "Oh, you and what army?" "Ino, when I move, run for help. I can hold them off for a while." "But," she interrupted. "Go, Taijuu Kage Bushin no Jutsu." The strategically placed parkland between the city and the gate turned into a sea of orange with a burst of smoke that obscured Ino. And a raging sea. Two people stood in the middle, one confused and the other afraid and hesitant. "Ino, why do you not move? You must relocate." She didn't move, though. She froze. Frozen in disbelief at the treachery, the enemy's key, and all the strange things Naruto himself had forced upon her. This Ino wasn't ready for them yet, and it was too much. This Ino had not lost friends and family, fought innumerable battles, or been his wife for 8 years. He didn't own this Ino. For a moment, he had forgotten. Perhaps a bit too firmly, he took hold of her arm and drew her to him. Although it was much more intimate than he had intended, it had the desired effect because she looked at him in pained confusion and her stunned expression fell. Despite everything, she nodded and started to move when he said, "Go. I'll cover you." His voice was so warm, and his smile was so contagious. Too late, too little. Ino crumpled to the ground, screaming in agony as her left shoulder exploded in a splash of red. "Strong. But we're stronger than your little copies." He ran to Ino's side and pulled her around to prevent her from bleeding out while the woman and men stood laughing. As he continued to focus on the enemy in front of him, the wrap on her arm soon turned to gauze. They appeared unconcerned. He briefly looked away from the Sound 4, and stopped. Blood. It made his hands tremble. He had neglected the warm liquid dripping against his fingers because he was so intent on keeping her alive and keeping the Sound 4 where he could see them. His hands were stained with her blood once more. Naruto put Ino down gently and stepped forward, keeping his future Anbu captain and the enemy at bay for the time being. A roaring noise drowned out the world. It was a moment before he recognized the sound as his own. Even though the park-like area was now illuminated in a gloomy dark red, every detail, including Sasuke's horrified expression, was visible. Ignoring the glances from the 5 across from him, he growled, "You're feeding me chakra, aren't you, Kurama? Boy, they hurt your mate." Naruto took that as fact and retracted the Kyuubi cloak within himself, keeping it simmering at the surface. "You summoned my chakra all by yourself." Although it wasn't a true nature chakra, it would help him become more powerful. For a second. Already, a story telling burning sensation was developing at his extremities. Who hurt her? The twins. Naruto's blood-red eyes shifted to Sakin and Yukon, the young men with gray hair. As expected, the domineering brother's hand held a blood stained kunai. Naruto stepped down, then disappeared. Without a body to keep the bloodline functioning, the twins' rear head exploded in a gory mess, and his body solidified inside the other brother. Blood that had been flowing was suddenly stopped, bones that had been ripped through others appeared, and the remaining man's eyes rolled back into his head as blood poured from all of his openings, both natural and newly made. He then fell to the ground. The battle. Hardened sound troops had already leveled up and were waiting with mixed breaths, watching the Jinchuriki turn and glare at them with a bloodied arm. It was difficult to avoid watching. The big one complained that, he's even stronger now. The redhead ignored the big man's retort about her language as she prepared her flute and declared, he's a fucking monster. The 6-armed man grumbled, who put the boss fight at the start of this game. No matter, all bosses have weaknesses. Naruto felt uneasy as the three and Sasuke turned to face Ino. The girl breathing heavily and now unconscious at their threat. He had put himself in the wrong position in his rush to kill the twins. Now Ino was in danger. Naruto began, he wouldn't. But, to his increasing alarm, the man did. Each of his several hands whirled 3 blades, each aimed at the prone Ino. Naruto's reaction was automatic. Only a moment later did I realize what it was. Genjutsu. He cursed as he crashed face first into a huge earthen wall that had risen in front of him, and the song that made the blades faded with them. He turned to face the 4 adversaries after realizing his vulnerability, only to get hit in the arm by a foul, golden substance. Another set of wads seized his other arm and both legs before he could remove it with his claws. Despite his best efforts, he was unable to swiftly claw through the gel because it had solidified. Because of the 3 people in front of him working together, he was stuck. The 3 of them split apart as a chirping noise erupted, revealing Sasuke clutching his chakra laced arm while grinning maniacally. His chakra, which was being absorbed from the wall behind him, was not reacting. He sensed assistance approaching, but it was too far away. He only managed an ironic glint in his eyes, but if he had been able to laugh, he would have. I suppose what they said about how things change the more is true. Ino's next when I'm done with you, Dobi, for her interference. Sasuke ran toward him, and he stood glaring untold. He felt pain that was familiar from his dreams but much more intense. Naruto's head was starting to swim from the effects of blood loss when Sasuke smirked and looked at him. He heard nothing more after that. Too easy, goodbye Dobi. Naruto pulled Sasuke's arm away from him. Suddenly, his eyes took on a completely different color. When he realized he had unlocked his ultimate Sharingan, his smile grew. His smile faded as the various forms of chakra came into focus. His position was being rushed to by hundreds of chakra signatures. The brightest and fastest one was racing out of the Hokage Tower, saying, Sasuke. Sama, we need to retreat. There are too many for even you to defeat. You're not ready yet. That woman was already a force to be reckoned with. Their time to flee was limited. He detested it, but they had to leave right away. Fine. The 5 left for the gate after hearing the words, Yamanaka's lucky tonight, we're out of here. Tsunade's bulky sandals slammed home next to Naruto's shattered body, still wedged in the wall, just as the sound of the nin were disappearing into the night with their prize. Naruto. Naruto. That son of a bitch hit me with it again. The elderly man screamed, slamming his fist into the bars of Kyuubi's cell. As he lay there, watching the darkness seep in from the sides of the cell, Kurama complained, that rotten Uchiha has the eyes of Madara now. The lights were already returning to the large room. Tsunade is here, we'll be fine, Kurama. And with our life restored the fucking Uchiha will be deprived of his Mangekyo. Naruto's eyes darkened as he said, hey, too bad I can't see the look on his face when that happens. No matter. I'll kill him, for threatening to hurt Ino. For Sakura's sake. No more chances to him. Agreed. The old hand gently leaned against the muzzle of the enormous fox that lay in the cage, saying, I'm also going to do it to save you as well. No one precious to me is going to die this time except of old age. After a moment of looking stunned, Kyuubi pushed against the man's hand while closing his eyes. It had getting harder to disbelieve the words you told me that day I met you. I told you Kurama. He was being resuscitated from unconsciousness, his figure warping. He disappeared, leaving behind an introspective Kyuubi. I got rid of your anger and hatred before, I'll do it again. I'll let you live like Rakudo Sennin wanted you to, he said. Naruto's eyes turned to Jiraiya, who spoke in a harsh, reproachful tone, about time you came back to the living. He could see that his body was covered in bandages. More to hide his fully recovered body than to hide his injuries. We're safe? Jiraiya asked, nodding and indicating the dimly glowing seals all around the room. Not the best privacy seals, but the man who created the best was still a child, of course. They would have to do it. What happened? As Jiraiya shook his head, he trailed off. I had a hunch he would move last night. Danzo pushed the Uchiha 2 weeks early to Orochimaru. How long? Then Naruto cursed, 3 days. It's too late to find the Uchiha. Then our only hope of not repeating Orochimaru's complete Snake Sennin form is the fact it's been almost a week without Kabuto to keep Orochimaru's current body from falling apart. He should have had to replace it, then we still have time if that's the case. Naruto nodded and said, about 3 years as you and my spies said then. About right, maybe a little shorter. Sasuke should be strong enough when the time comes to remove Orochimaru for a while. Never figured out how that snake came back, but I have a good idea it was the Teme. It's so insane how many strong enemies came back to life because of that man. Naruto fell silent for a moment before saying, Kabuto's dead. Unless someone brings him back we're safe from a total repeat of my time. Line. The Toad Sennin was shocked by Naruto's abrupt transformation and exclaimed, Arrow. Sennin. The young boy he had met and trained, feeling guilty and sorry for leaving alone, was now the Nanadem Hokage. Ino. He appeared momentarily distracted, gazing at his hands, likely recalling the girl's blood on them. Jiraiya sighed, is she alright? Naruto growled at the idea of his incapacity to protect her, saying, she's out of danger, but she'll have a pretty big scar and some minor motor control loss in that shoulder. But she's alive, Naruto. I was an idiot. Just like she always called me. My Ino. I forgot myself. For a moment, I forgot this wasn't my Ino. I put too much on a genin. She froze. I should have been better prepared. I had forgotten how strong the Sound Four really were. And that was without that Kagaya clan member popping up. I failed her all over again. Naruto's eyes widened. It felt like a stone. Heavy slap in the face combined with a knife in the back from a loved one. You must have produced the worst ninjas with an attitude like that. Jiraiya was viewed with utter hatred by Naruto's enraged and hateful eyes. If this is how you acted as Hokage, it's no wonder Konoha fell. How dare you? How dare you? My ninjas were strong, they were better, they lost more, they had more to gain than these. These peacetime punks, than even you venerable Toad shit could ever know. Every smile they gave, every happy moment they had, everyone worked hard to get them, and I was right there beside them. Every tear, every drop of blood, and every life we lost went to make it better for the rest. I gave my all for my Konoha. For its people, no better or worse than all those WHO came before me. Naruto trembled with rage as he stood in front of his mentor, who remained unfazed even as the boy in front of him almost spat his words up into the Sannin's face. So show some respect. Jiraiya calmly wiped the spittle that had fallen on his cheek before heading for the door. Then prove their lives were worth it by making things better. Stop living in the past and grasp the future of here and now. Don't waste it by living in the past. On something you can't change. The older man stopped halfway out the door as the privacy seals burned away into ash. Not everyone gets a second chance. As Naruto's rage subsided, guilt struck him hard. She's in the room 3 down on your left. Maybe you can let her, if you won't let me and Heim, in. Damn arrow. Sennin, on the left, 3 doors down. Hey, Ino. Chan. She watched him warily as he made the sign on purpose. Shoji and Shikamaru would typically be in the room, but there were only the 2 of them. To give him time, Tsunade must have had them work on some busy tasks. Her shoulder wound from her position reminded him too much of the blow that ultimately killed her, so the scene before him was rather unsettling. She took the hit to keep him alive. Naruto. She observed him sitting next to her, his hand shaking as he refrained from taking hers. Taking the initiative, she grasped his hand. His shoulders shook and then settled. He lifted his mask. A seal that shouldn't have existed for another 12 years materialized when his hand touched the railing's side. The external environment. He inhaled deeply once more and said, What? What I am about to tell you. It's still being held close to the Hokage's personal and trusted. I am not the same Naruto who left to find Tsunade. Whether or not this is a dream, I have knowledge of a possible reality. A reality where Konoha, almost everyone in it, and myself have died. She refrained from laughing because of how depressing and monotonous he was. She instantly stopped laughing when the boy withdrew, his face etched with betrayal. Why? You were crazy, Naruto. Baka, she exclaimed. What? Only my Heim could call me that. She meekly stared at him from her bed as the complete hatred brought the insane humor down for her. Naruto's rage was swiftly subdued by the expression on her face. Why? Your time. He averted his shamed gaze. My wife. Only I called her that. After her family passed away in the war. After I learned the sign I can't resist showing you. My wife, she was a wonderful person. I knew all these silly little things about her, things I can't help but see in her counterpart. She loved sliced tomatoes after a hot day, chilled pudding after a spicy meal, a nice warm soak in the snow, something she did with her mother as a child, and something she wanted to do with her own daughter one day. How she wished she had given Sakura another chance and let Sasuke be damned when she found out about Sakura's crush. How lavender is her favorite shade of purple because it's royal purple and her eye color mixed together. How scared she was when one day her mother and father started yelling about her grades at the academy, and how she. Ino cupped her ears, saying, "Stop it. Stop talking. Shut up." He did, and while her thoughts were racing, he waited calmly for her to answer. How are you so knowledgeable about my dreams and myself? Because for 8 years of my life, they were my dreams too. Whatever became of me? She passed away. After a period of silence, Ino said, I can tell you anything you want, you have the presence of mind that can keep it safe. She died protecting me so I could continue to lead our people. And if you'd like, you could always ask your father to erase the memories from your mind. Nothing I tell you now will ever be remembered. But I think you should be aware. You have the freedom to make a decision in light of everything that just transpired. With hesitation, she said, okay. Start from the beginning, or at least, from something that I can grasp. Okay, Naruto, don't hurry me up. His laugh wasn't particularly sour, but it wasn't a pleasant one either. He leaned back in the chair and said, just like she always bitched at me. All right, let's review and see if anything makes sense. After that, we can proceed. She moved the kusanagi to her left shoulder, then. It had been the most strange 4 hours of Ino's life. Or second life, as she wasn't sure what to make of it all. It sounded so unbelievable at times, but if she put herself in her future self's shoes, she could honestly see where she would have made the same choices. It was intensely overwhelming and both frightening and addictive in that Ino wanted to know more but also nothing at all. The same side as well. I'm afraid of how much you resembled and mimicked. His hands disappeared over her injured shoulder, my Ino's death. How near? His gaze alone gave her the impression that someone was crossing over her grave, so he stepped aside and picked up her chart from the foot of her bed. Your left subclavia was partially cut, and there was muscle damage from cellular deterioration of some kind. I'll presume it had to do with the brother's lineage. Healing is being thwarted by the cellular deterioration. Your prognosis is to remain in the hospital while being monitored for any further cell infection from this degradation. I remember everything, he said, taking a deep breath and holding up the chart while keeping his eyes closed. Best recovery in 3 months. The left subclavian is completely severed. Irreversible harm to the left shoulders and collarbones musculature and bone. Rejection of healing, wound exhibiting indications of unidentified contamination. Complete artery replacement is not feasible. She made about 75 hours, he said, gulping down a glass of water he had taken from the bathroom off to the side of the room. Prognosis, death in approximately 72 hours. Ino shivered and paused as he brought himself back to the present. You know this box was marked on hers. Just enough time for me to make it to her side. His eyes grew beyond the present, most likely to that time. Which box? Curious but uneasy about her alleged death, Ino inquired. Naruto gestured. This container. What is meant by that? My Ino's had this one marked, he said, pointing to a plain little box that had no lettering or words on it and had always piqued his interest. Something fell in the pit of her stomach, and I'm positive of it. Naruto. It's a pregnancy box. The idea numbed her as much as it did him. You're saying that Ino was pregnant when she died? She. Not possible. We had attempted. But, I mean, nothing else she didn't tell me. I wouldn't have allowed her to leave. Otherwise. She lied to me to keep me safe. He felt empty, as if something more had shattered inside of him. It had been almost 40 years since he had lost his wife, but time had not lessened the pain of loss in the least. He had just been informed that he had also lost his child. He stood abruptly, her clipboard clattering loudly against the floor as it slid from his numb fingers, and wetness slid across his forearm as he tried to hide how much this affected him, trying to wipe away the tears and smile, but it wasn't working. Naruto. This Ino called out softly and uncertainly. I apologize. I must. I have to leave. Time traveler or dreamer Uzumaki Naruto, Nanadem Hokage, former husband, former father, fled. Confusion, injury, shock, and curiosity plagued Yamanaka Ino, who could only watch the door close before glancing at the floor chart and its profound significance. As the young man fled the hospital, Jiraiya leaned against the rail beside her and said, "She was pregnant with his child. I realized he didn't know when he told me he had memorized her medical chart." Uzumaki Ino was just over 3 months pregnant when he was attacked by Kabuto, Tsunade said. Naruto had to use up all of his remaining Kyuubi chakra to heal after being struck by the new Snake Sennin's ferocious swing. When Ino realized this, she almost severed her arm by moving into the path of a deadly blow. Kabuto retreated afterward. The wound wouldn't scab over, so she continued to bleed both internally and out. The medical physicians must have known she was pregnant and written it down, but apparently they never told him. After all, who tells their Hokage they lost both? I bet they all thought he knew. But we know he never knew. His wife never got a chance to tell him. He never knew he was going to be a father, until today. After hearing what he had just heard, Jiraiya had no desire to boast. It was an impressive seal he put up. But we had to know. He went far, but I must not have taught him everything I knew. Tsunade said sadly, "No, you probably didn't have time to." They remained quiet for a while. "Still think it's just a dream? Does it matter? Everything is shot to hell? You never know. After all, the more you change things, the more they stay the same." Jiraiya said, "Now that's a miserably sobering thought. If that's the case, then let's go drinking. I need something, and I bet you do too." "What about Naruto? He'll be okay for a while. He's survived all of us dying, remember? He'll hole up somewhere, run it through his head until he can come back acting like he didn't break down. He doesn't know when to quit. Something he must have got from me. Better than being a pervert. Time. It is our greatest adversary, the only enemy we cannot beat. We are gathered here today to honor our brave few who have made the ultimate sacrifice for we, the many, who are still alive today. These souls who gave their all for those who would remain, and for those yet to come, a chance for a better life than one they struggled in. Today is not of us, but of them. Today, we celebrate the lives of our dead so none will ever forget them." Naruto put his scroll down to look at the sad gathering. He paused as he passed his hand over 2 names on the memorial stone, one more recent than the other. "Mourn them, but don't feel sad. Don't make their sacrifices useless because of pain. Take heart that your happiness, laughter, and even..." They cheered him on, reminding him of the applause he received after defeating pain. "Love will reach them. So take heart and be merry. Today we shall send up so great a message that our fallen in the heavens will surely hear it," declared the crowd, one of the main justifications for this Memorial Day. He was signaled to go see their newest family member by Konohamaru's daughter.in.law. Since the Hokage was 75 years old and only had Konohamaru and his family to relate to his family, he was powerless to resist. All that remained was the small clan, and although he avoided them out of concern that they would be cursed, he was unable to avoid this young boy, who was named after the child's great uncle. The recent death of Ayame had left the Hokage depressed, but little Asuma had kept him afloat. A warmth that Naruto had long believed gone would return when the young boy so naively grasped at his hand's worn thumb. The sense that his village was at last headed in the right direction, despite all the struggles and efforts it had endured. Something the old man had thought was lacking in his soul was restored by the little baby babble directed at the 75-year-old's gentle but scarred face. The sense of hope. Not for him, for his days as Hokage and on this planet were coming to an end. Dryly, he thought, the former hopefully before the latter. No, the hope was that Konoha's next generation, which would be either Konohamaru or his student, would continue to ride his horse. There was no longer any dangerous flickering of the will of fire, still as bright and radiant as it had been when he was first made genin. When Iruka had acknowledged him, the man permitted a rare smile. For some in the crowd who had never seen it, it caused a pause, followed by a sense of release. As though they would finally be permitted to relax after all these years. For Konoha, it was a joyful and peaceful day. Naruto woke up abruptly. He was observing the pre-dawn haze emanating from the sun that was just below the horizon. With a sigh, he reclined and gazed at his ceiling, attempting to recall the emotions that had accompanied the day. A genuine grin appeared on his face. The old pervert might have been correct. He was still alive. They might not be the people he had known, and hopefully they wouldn't have to face the issues his village faced in order to become the people he remembered. If he helped these people recover, their lives might be better. Whether it was a dream or not, this was a fresh opportunity to put things right, even though his past would always be there. "You remind me of myself, Naruto. Yeah, just like when I was young, but that'll all change with time. Uchiha is a bastard. A man who had passed away almost 60 years ago, 60 in TOL, would not be allowed to win. Damn it, he was an Uzumaki. In the end, he had a Nindo. This time, he could prevent a Nindo from breaking. Naruto inhaled deeply as his thoughts became clear. Perhaps it was time to try to improve it. He then started getting ready for the day, saying, "I'll do it for your younger selves, everyone." Datbeo. That's when he heard the argument coming from his front door. Jade's unreadable expression was fixed on the Dawn Sun. Due to sleep deprivation and the previous few days of crying, they were red and bloodshot. The loss of her beloved Sasuke and the apparent near murder of her friend and fellow teammate caused her to become listless. The facts were damning and insusceptible. Naruto had nearly been killed by Sasuke. A defenseless friend had been the victim of Sasuke's assassination jutsu. How was she expected to comprehend it? She couldn't stop thinking about what Naruto had said. Immediately after telling her that Sasuke would go, he had gone to the gate. As though he knew it would happen. What was happening? Green's eyes blinked before turning to face her dresser and the clothing within. She required clarification. However, only one person would possess them and be prepared to respond to her. Ino once more. Sakura nearly snarled. Why was Ino here, once more? Although nobody had seen Naruto since he left the hospital, it wasn't because they didn't try. The rest of the genin, excluding Team Guy, had been searching for him. According to what she had observed, the new Junin Shizune and Ayame from Ichiraku had also been out and about. Ino had been surprisingly the most concerned. Sakura would frequently run into Ino, whose troubled expressions always made her pause, when she had plucked up the courage to go and look for her stray friend in recent days. Hours had gone by before Naruto disappeared, according to rumors that he had gone to see Ino. Ino had kept quiet about it all, as had Jiraiya and Tsunade, who had partied the night away in spite of the duties that came with their jobs. They were all aware of something. And if her friend was harmed by it then? Ino jumped, as though her thoughts had been a million miles away. What's going on, Ino? She asked. Ino appeared agitated, as though she had been caught in the act of doing something improper, and asked, "Forehead. What are you doing here?" Sakura's face became more tense. "What is going on? I was just seeing if Naruto was here." "Why?" Ino's anxious expression returned. "Did you do something to him? When he came to see you in that room?" "All we did is talk. He was sorry I got hurt by those people who came and got Sasuke. Honest." She trailed off, but the threat was clear. "But why has he disappeared, Ino? What did you tell him? If you said something to him that hurt him all?" Ino gave a slight wince. "You did. What did you say to him, Ino?" The two girls paused, then turned to see a rather unkempt Naruto staring at them as if they were crazy. "What are you two doing standing outside my door, about to get into it?" they asked. When the two girls threw him to the ground, the expression only intensified and he began to flush. "Naruto!" shouted the girls. Hi?" As Naruto excused himself to make some tea, there was an awkward silence in the apartment. The two girls stared at each other, trying to figure out what the other was trying to do. Sakura sat in his only chair, and Ino sat on his bed. The space was large enough to allow the girls to continue their conversation, without being bothered by Naruto. "So why are you here, Forehead?" "I was worried about him, so I came to check on him." "What about you, Pig?" "The same," sneered Sakura. "How is that, Ino? Since when did you ever get to know my teammate?" "Since he saved my life, since he got hurt for helping me, I want to help him." "So you're here because you feel responsible for his injuries? That's pretty weak." "Shut up, Sakura." The sharp edges of the normally lovely girl's face were marred by the intensity of Ino's voice and the almost hateful expression Sakura dared to express. It was so sudden that Sakura hesitated as Ino went on, and it twisted the Yamanaka's gaze into a face much older than her own. "You know nothing of him. You were so convinced of that asshole's superiority that I bet you're still in shock that he did this to a teammate who has helped you out time and again. I know you're only here because Naruto mentioned this might happen and you want answers." Sakura's rage was caused by the accusation, which was she retaliated after her inner self took a direct line to her anger. "You don't know him either, Ino.Pig. You're just here because you're guilty. You don't know the kind of pain he has gone through for us, so watch what you say. Trust me when I say I know him, okay? We talked that night, we got to know each other. I'm not just here because I feel responsible for him being hurt, I'm worried about him." Sakura's disbelief further enraged Ino. "Why make that face? How is that so hard to believe? I actually care about him." What? Sakura's rage nearly subsided when she realized how unbelievable Ino's statement was. Ino's face reddened. Additionally, there was a hint of fear in Ino's voice that caused her to falter in her response. It's unbelievable to me that you're in love with. Fool, I don't mean it the way you think. He's a close friend, like Shika and Shoji, Ino blurted out, her cheeks still red despite her efforts to calm down. In the hospital, we spoke for a while after he helped me. As we got to know one another, I realized how mistaken I had been about him. However, he is Sakura, he had a lot on his mind. Much more than you've ever acknowledged, and it was wearing him down. I made an effort to assist him, but all it did was trigger a terrible memory. I want to be there for him no matter what, even though I feel bad about it. I'm hoping you will as well. But Sakura, I caution you. Be careful what you say because you have no idea the kind of suffering he has endured for us. Ino reclined on the bed she was sitting on, her thoughts racing, and Sakura leaned back, attempting to relax her back as she thought about what Ino had said. The two reflective girls were unaware that a pillow behind the bed Ino was lying on disappeared with a tiny puff of smoke not long after they fell silent. Shortly afterward, Naruto entered with a small tray of tea for them to share while conversing. Neither girl brought up the argument, and Naruto stuck to light conversation in an attempt to calm the two girls down from the evident emotional turbulence he had overheard. I'm going to leave because it's almost time for lunch and my parents wanted me back by then. Okay, Ino. Do you want to go home with me? Sakura said as she got up and started to move in the direction of the door. Her response was so silent that she turned to see the two talking as if they were speaking without words. Sakura's chest pounded at the sight, and it disturbed her just enough to make the situation even more awkward for her when Naruto finally answered. I actually have a question for Ino, so I'll discuss everything with you tomorrow, okay, Sakura? Oh, all right. I suppose I'm grateful for the tea. I'll see you later. Tomorrow, then. As Naruto escorted Sakura out of his apartment, she noticed that Ino had not moved an inch from her position, which, for some reason, only made her chest tighten. Have you had an opportunity to speak with Ba-chan yet? Sakura paused at his doorway, appearing strangely confused, until she remembered what he had said that evening. No, I haven't. Naruto stage winced and gave a sheepish smile, saying, I've been too worried about my baka of a teammate. His attention to her helped to ease the pinching sensation, but it didn't completely go away. I apologize. Tomorrow, we'll go ask her directly, all right? Right before lunch. Yes. Naruto, see you tomorrow. I'm happy you're okay. Thank you. See you later. Sakura-chan. It had been the first time since he had returned that he had truly meant it, and it was evident because Sakura blushed and nodded before he hurried off nervously. He shut the door and placed his back on it, and after he was sure Sakura was far enough away to not hear him, he released his younger self and let out a weary sigh. There are days I feel like I should go to jail for talking with pretty young girls like you too. In actuality, you are biologically younger than I am. As she lay on his bed, Ino said, so your body at least isn't a pedophile. Naruto gave her a miserable expression and began to perspire. In a way, this moment reminded him of the nights when he and his wife just relaxed next to each other, enjoying each other's company. I guess since you were here and talking, not to mention your little talk with Sakura before I came in, you decided to keep the memories? He said, sighing again and moving to the opposite side of the bed, ignoring the slight tensing of the girl next to him. With a slight flush on her cheeks, Ino blew out a breath that Naruto was unaware she was holding while scowling at him. That pillow seemed out of place to me. Naruto shrugged and said, but... Yes, I would like to keep them. Naruto, we haven't been very good friends before. However, I don't want us to become close because everyone else we know died. I genuinely want to be your friend. She paused and turned to face him, saying, to be there and help you as you try and make things better. Are you going to make an effort to improve the situation? Her expression was simply too similar to his wife's irate face for him to say anything other than, yes, not that he would have said anything else. Yes, I will ensure that no one else passes away before me ever again if I am able to do so. Not Sakura-chan, not you, not anybody. Asuma was the first to die, if my memory serves me correctly. I'll make sure we're prepared for those immortal jerks. You can count on it. Why don't you tell me about them? I could secretly run things by Shikamaru and make plans. Tell me about you, too. Naruto paused for a second before shaking his head. I want to hear about this mysterious future man I'm supposedly falling head over heels for after learning about myself the last time. Ino. Don't bet on us getting married this time around because the future is still up in the air. My Ino was a different woman than you. In any case, not yet, and hopefully never. She didn't have a pleasant journey to become the person I married. Don't limit yourself by believing that the only way it will be is by thinking about what has already happened. I believe that if I hadn't stopped believing it, I would have gone insane. He sighed once more as he looked out at the city, saying, at least that's what I keep telling myself. Also, Sakura is still alive. Although she has changed, she is still present. Alive. She was right, he said, looking at her with a pitiful smile on his lips. My Ino always had a deep-seated fear that she was second best to Sakura, and I'm honest enough to realize that. My heart belonged to Sakura until the day she passed away. Sakura's alive, he said, taking a nervous breath and turning his head away because Ino's expression was too intense to bear. My Ino and I were so broken by the time we got together that we fit each other. Everybody is still alive. Who knows who you might fall for instead, or what will happen to any of us, if I can keep it that way. So don't just put every hope you have into me, because I really do care about you, Ino. I don't want to hurt you. I just don't want to lose any chance any of us have because we let a future decide the future. And introspective. Looking, Ino nodded, but she said nothing. The idea of them getting married had been suddenly creeping into her dreams lately, but she understood it. Was it incorrect to state that she thought the concept was intriguing? He started talking about a priestess and a trip to Demon Country, and she turned back into him. Ino walked out of the apartment with her, locking the door behind them, and asked, where are you heading, Naruto? After nearly 3 hours of lying on the bed and conversing, the sun was now getting close to its zenith. Ino watched with anxiety as a part of her, the part that felt sympathy for her former self, hoped that he would succeed. I need to get someone out of the same rut I have fallen into. With any luck I can save him. If I can do that, then maybe there is some hope for me too. Not to mention I'll be saving Lee's life as well. If only to have the opportunity to see how things might work out for them this time as well. The Warriors' Memorial was a shadeless clearing, and the only thing that provided any respite from the intense heat and sun was the cool wind from the recent rainfall. The position of his shadow against the stationary stone told him how long he had been there. An extra hour. Well, it wasn't surprising because he had a lot on his mind. How Naruto had nearly become like Rin, and how he had let Obito down. Rin. In an attempt to suppress the pain and shock, he closed his eyes and tried to forget the moment she whispered his name. Kakashi hesitated for a second when Naruto's voice interrupted him, saying, you know Rin won't like it if you stay here brooding over her name. She would want you to move on from her death. You wouldn't know, Naruto, but it hurts to lose someone who trusts you because of your own faults. After a moment of staring at the sky, Naruto shrugged and said, I think I would know better than you realize. No matter. Kakashi remained motionless and said, you are not in control of your body. You know that, right? Uchiha Madara controlled you by using Obito's eye to force your body into motion. Rin was just another casualty from that man's hatred of Konoha, and more to the point, the Senju outside of Hiroshima. What? Rin was a half Senju. She could have controlled the Biju they implanted in her far better than either of you thought. If she and Obito had children, then those offspring would reunite the two parts of the Rakudo Sennin's powers, have the boon of being a Jinchuriki's progeny, and become more powerful than even Madara could ever hope to be. Not to mention the two and their children would be devoutly loyal to a leaf that had made the Uchiha cast him aside. He couldn't have that, so during the battle that almost claimed Obito's life, the rock slide was from Uchiha Madara, not the rock Junin. Now that he was fully focused on the blonde, Kakashi asked, how do you know these things, Naruto? This doesn't make sense. Madara had been dead for almost an entire century at that point, and you make it sound like Obito lived. What is this nonsense? Kakashi's Sharingan whirled rapidly as he tried to determine what or who was in front of him. In time. I must get you to see this for its true value. You have fought yourself too hard and too long to let it linger. The Kakashi of now needs to be pushed like the Kakashi of before it's too late for him too. Where was I? 3 months go by, you and Rin are on an easy mission, my father is nowhere close, given this is the day he gains the title Kiroi Senko. Unbeknownst to you both, Uchiha Obito has lived. Half of his body is replaced by a partial clone of Shodem Hokage, being drip-fed information on the world above to keep him hopeful and full of love for Rin. Madara has let his hope linger to pull his Sharingan to a higher level when his plan comes to fruition. Madara has taken the place as the Mizukage, and uses his puppet to capture Rin, then alter her to be a miniaturized version of the Kyuubi attack. However, you both escape, when only Rin was supposed to. You were a loose end they were not prepared for. An elite group was sent out, to try and provoke Rin into losing control of the power, perhaps in the hopes to use her against you. They want the Sharingan gone, to keep you from using it should she lose control in the village. Around the same time, Obito is told of your battle, ambushed for no reason. He is still the Obito you knew and wants to aid you in battle. However, due to his inability to release himself from the chamber he is in, he allows himself to be supported by another clone. However, unsuspected to himself, the clone is directly under control of Uchiha Madara. With the clones intertwined into his nervous system, Madara had managed to make you put yourself into a causality loop with Obito's linked Sharingan. A trick Itachi used on Kabuto in my timeline. Every action you do is thrown back until you are forced into doing what the controller wants, in this case using your Chidori. Only the reason isn't what you think, and the target is. Stop. Kakashi's eyes were filled with guilt and then hatred. I don't need to be reminded of who was the target. It was never your fault, Kakashi. It wasn't even Obito's fault. Obito made it to you both, cutting through Madara's interference in time for you both to see her die. All in order to create the perfect vessel for Madara's desires. To be used on the day I was born, a true Uchiha Avenger, born from his hatred of a failed promise, the ultimate loss, and budding scorn for the village leader who had abandoned him and Rin. The ability to control the Kyuubi, to use the Mangekyo. But he failed to plan for my father, and when Obito failed, Madara's soul had already moved on and only a shade whose memories were fragmented at best were left to plan. For years they plotted, and when they found out about pain, they began planning for the destruction of our world as we all know it. This information they both told me this shortly before trying to start their Moon's Eye plan. A plan almost put into effect but was stopped by a sacrifice from both the Hachibi Jinchuriki and the Sandaime Tsuchikage. Naruto's eyes closed in pained remembrance of the two men. The failure of his promise a further 2 times that day he had lost Neji. Naruto didn't like the suspicious expression on his sensei's face and asked, "Who are you?" "I am Naruto, just the soul is far older than the skin. I was once the leader of the entire shinobi forces against Uchiha Madara and Obito in the 4th and against Yakushi Kabuto in the 5th Shinobi War. I was Nanadem Hokage. I am son of the Uzumaki Kushina and Namikaze Minato, the Jinchuriki of Kurama, Kyuubi no Kitsune, and I come back from the future with a powerful desire." Kakashi's resolve had been put to the test, and now he was on the verge of attacking or believing the boy in front of him when he said, "Even if what you say is true, how can I trust you or Naruto?" A Junin, possibly the strongest Junin of Konoha, did not want to experience that emotion. "I am, without a doubt, Uzumaki Naruto, a ninja of Konoha. My dream is to become Hokage. One to surpass all the previous Hokage. To become a bigger badass than my father. To become stronger shinobi than my mother. And most of all, to keep all my precious people safe. That is a promise of this, last, and any lifetime. Datbeo." Kakashi's eyes gazed at Naruto's heavily breathing form for a pregnant moment before the Sharingan eye closed and the man in front of him grinned, bringing the younger man immense relief. If the elder Uzumaki ever felt like that lost little boy again, it was now. Well, what teacher would I be if I didn't believe one of my precious students? The future Hokage embraced his mentor without regard for propriety or his actual age. The older man simply gave the boy a silent pat on the head and said, "Thank you, Kakashi, sensei." Tsunade leaned back and massaged her aching shoulders before a set of rough hands took over. Kakashi knows now. Tsunade gave a brief sneer, but she chose to ignore it because the elderly pervert's hands were more effective at relieving her tension than her single hand. The peeping, or observation, crystal was dwindling. Frankly, it may be a good thing. The Hokage. Gaki did say that it was significantly harder to combat the Uchiha without the Sharingan that matched Obito's. That was why Rock Lee had Kakashi's implanted by Sakura. It was a desperation move on both their parts. You heard him though, the transplant failed. Rock Lee could not keep up with the stress it put upon his body, forcing chakra where it couldn't, and he died shortly after the war. Kakashi has had significantly longer with it with much fewer rejection symptoms. With the eye where it is and the knowledge we now have on our Akatsuki leaders, we may be able to not only win this war, but save more lives than before. Only we have one more issue to dig out before we can prepare. Yes. It's time our roots got exposed to the light.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.